There's a new American gangsters, 'cause we speak bold, give no fuck about the haters. It can take freedom from a cold dead hands, we're locked in love for the last days. 'Cause there's a new American gangsters.
This is a little more straight than that. New gender.
Ready to die for this land.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Today we have a very special episode for you. We have Richard Archie with the Tennessee Firearms Association here to discuss the lawsuit with the city of Memphis. For those who do not know, on November the 5th, the day that we elected Donald Trump, Memphis decided to pass gun control restrictions. We're going to get into all the details with that. It's quite astounding that such a red state like Tennessee could go so far left. But before we get started, what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce our sponsors. And today we have our first sponsor is Mid-TN Kirby. Now, I've been in the Kirby business for over 20 years. They are made in America and have been for the entire 110-year history. Most people think they're just vacuums, but they do far, far more. They literally clean every single thing in the house, from windows to carpets, rugs, hardwood, tile, grout, mattresses, and even the dog. They have a factory rebuild agreement that lasts the lifetime of the purchaser, and they only make one piece of equipment. They feel that you should do your best, do it once, and do it right. And this would be the last machine you ever have to buy. If it sounds interesting to you, please visit midtnkirby.com. Preview one today. That button there at the top will open up your email. Contact me, the Kirby Man, and I will come out, show you one to make sure that it's a right fit for your home before you decide to make a purchase. When you get finished doing that, or maybe you just see how much dirt's in your couch and you decided you wanted to buy a new one, run on over to A State of Creative over on Facebook. This is the best place where you can find new, refurbished, freshly cleaned furniture. They offer delivery. They also do some other things. Sometimes they have nightstands and things, but we've got chaise lounges, porter's chairs. We've got all sorts of things, leather recliners. You guys just check them out. A State of Creative over on Facebook. And last but not least, head on over to patriotpunknetwork.com. There you can watch previous episodes of the Patriot Punkcast. You can learn all about Tennessee's new voucher plan and if it's really school choice or not. We also have an AI song by called Crooked World. You can report corruption, and if you are in a position, it is the season of giving, and Cyber Monday is coming up. We are a small business. Please consider clicking the support tab and supporting the work that we do here. Just $5 will go a long way. Obviously, if you're in a position to give more, or if you're in a position to sign up for a recurring contribution, please do so. We have some exciting stuff. You will actually be getting an email about that on Thanksgiving. So without any further ado, I think we should just go ahead and get started. So before we bring on our guest, let me bring on my co-host and good friend and podcasting buddy, Daniel Wagner.
Good morning, Mr. Matheson. How goes
Good
it?
Morning. Pretty good. I think it's actually evening, but we're night owls, so we'll call it morning. But I'm excited. I love it when we see, for the most part, everyday citizens standing up and fighting the government peacefully, of course. I've said this since day one. We have got to participate in the litigation battle. The left has been doing it for decades, and it's really exciting that we have a group here in Tennessee that's going to take civil rights so seriously.
Before you bring him in, I just want to note that I'm very upset that we're about to have somebody better looking than us on our own show. So just let that be known.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring on our special guest for today, Mr. Richard Archie. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How about y'all?
We're hanging in there like a hair on a biscuit. If you would just give everyone just maybe a 30-second insight into what you do for the TFA and what the TFA specializes in.
Okay, I am the West Tennessee director of the Tennessee Firearms Association. We are, in fact, the only no-compromise gun rights group in the state of Tennessee. We've been in this business for the last 29 years. We're coming up next year on our 30th anniversary. And so we've been working to get the state of Tennessee back to what should be the original construct of the Tennessee Constitution that said the free men of this state have the right to keep and to bear arms for their common defense, period. And so that's simply what we're trying to do, is to take us back per Bruin into what is historical tradition in Tennessee. We are the patron state of shooting stuff, by the way. And so what we need to do is we need to go back to a point where it's not a crime for any person to carry a firearm in the state.
You know, I have to completely agree. Before we really break it down, I've heard that Tennessee's Second Amendment is unique, or is almost unique compared to all the other Second Amendments in the country. Is that...
Well, if you're talking about the Second Amendment analog that we have now, it was put on the books in 1870 by the then Democrats who were in charge of the state still at the end of the Civil War. And what they did was they took the original Second Amendment analog and they changed it by adding this codicil. However, the legislature shall have power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime. Now, that is not a delegated power that was given to the legislature by the people when they ratified the Constitution in 1796. And so therefore what they did was they just added that to their powers, but it is in fact unconstitutional for them to occupy that field because it's not a delegated power that was given to the legislature at that point. The Second Amendment is in fact a civil right, and we can prove that by simply going to the ruling from the Supreme Court of the United States in 2010, McDonald v. City of Chicago, that said that the Second Amendment was incorporated against the states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which in fact makes it a civil right. So the state of Tennessee has failed to change that, but it is in fact a civil right, and we should treat it that way.
I tend to agree. Just out of curiosity, you know, that took place in Chicago. How long had those laws been in effect in Chicago before someone was able to challenge it and get it in front of the highest court of the land?
Oh, it had been that way in you know, from the 20s on, and that came after they had all the trouble with prohibition and people shooting up everything with machine guns and such. And so they started passing laws making it illegal for people to be able to carry firearms. And it stayed on their books until that time. I mean, they still have the most constrictive set of laws with respect to their citizens being able to carry a firearm for their own protection in the United States. They also have some of the worst shooting numbers that you're ever going to find. Every weekend, they have about the same number that we have all year in the state of Tennessee. So, you know, it's crazy. The more laws you put out there, the more the criminals are going to be able to exercise that because they don't pay any attention to the laws. The only people that obey them are law-abiding citizens, which makes them targets for the criminals.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of out-of-control gun crime and its correlation between, I guess, an anti-gun outlook, let's talk about the city of Memphis. On November 5th, the city of Memphis had 3 referendums on the ballot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you tell everyone kind of a summary of what those 3 referendums were?
Okay, it's pretty simple and basic. The first, they said that you could not carry a handgun in the city of Memphis unless you perfected an enhanced carry permit, which requires you to take 8 hours of class time work and then 8 hours of range work. And in the state of Tennessee in 2022, the governor of Tennessee, Bill Lee, put forth a bill that the legislature passed, and he signed into law that said you don't have to have a permit to carry a firearm. They tend to call it constitutional carry. It's really not. Mm-hmm. What it is permitless handgun carry, because constitutional carry would allow you to carry long guns as well, but it's still a crime for any person to carry a long gun in Tennessee unless they're actively hunting with a hunting license and a permission slip from the person whose land they're on, or engaged in sport shooting at a range. Otherwise, it's illegal for you to carry a long gun and have ammunition within reach. But what Memphis said specifically is you could not carry a handgun unless you had the enhanced carry permit, which requires the training. And you got to pay the state about $150, and it costs you about $150 to take the class. So you're out $300. And last time I checked, when I read through the founders, they said anything you got to pay for is no longer a right. It's a privilege. So that's the first thing they did. Secondly,
before you go into the other two referendums, I just want to clarify the constitutional carry thing, because there's the long gun aspect, but it's also not constitutional carry because every single law enforcement officer certified by post in the state of Tennessee has a right to detain you.
That's correct.
Until you prove you are in compliance. So carrying a gun is still a crime in the state of Tennessee.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a very broad brush, which they can give you an exception after they identify you.
Right. Well, there are three different methods that you can offset the general crime, because 3917-1307A1 says it is an offense to carry a firearm or a club with the intent to go armed. That was put on our books in 1870. So that means even if you're sitting in your home, you're not even out and about, but if you have a firearm at that point, you're actually breaking the law right there. Because if you pick that handgun up in your house and intend to have it loaded and walk around, then you're intending to go armed. So you're actually in violation of the code statute right then. And that's been on our books since 1870, and we've been actively pursuing getting that taken off, but we haven't been able to get there quite yet. There will be a legislator this year that will run that bill again, which will try to take that off, but we haven't been able to get it across the goal line. They love to talk about in Tennessee, well, you can't expect to score a touchdown with every play, and maybe what you need to do is just try to gain a little yardage every year. Well, I don't find anything in the Constitution that says that I'm supposed to not be able to enjoy the rights and privileges enumerated in it fully. And no one's been able to show me that statute or clause yet. So,
well, it's also important to note that I think it was Bruce Griffey carried that before he became a circuit court judge.
That is correct.
A true constitutional carry bill.
That's right.
And correct me if I'm wrong. The response from the establishment, like Bill Lee and the Jack Johnsons and just the establishment Republicans, was, well, we can't do that. So we'll pass our own legislation, the one we described earlier, and we'll call it constitutional carry. And
that
they
is
basically
a correct enumeration. You're right.
So, okay, so Memphis, go ahead, Daniel.
Just asking, what kind of opposition are you currently facing on getting that bill passed?
It characteristically can't get out of committee. What they will do is they will refer that bill to the Civil Justice Committee in the House, and it never makes it out. Rusty Grills carried a bill 2 years ago that did that very thing. Then Monty Fritz carried the same bill last year, and they double referred it to civil and criminal, and it never got out of civil. What happens is these bills get killed in committee because the average legislator does not want to, especially House members, because they face the general public every 2 years for election. They don't want TFA to be able to say, well, you voted against a Second Amendment issue. So they try to kill it in committee so that they don't have to stand up on their hind legs and vote for it and have their vote recorded. Because right now in committees, it's all voice votes. So you can't say who voted yes or who voted no. And if a sponsor of a bill asks for a recorded vote, then he is set upon by his fellows, and they beat him about the head and shoulders by going, you should never do that because it puts us all in a bad light. But it's a fact.
I would encourage
every year.
So essentially this becomes like a little these committees become like a little black box of mystery that nobody can really hold an individual or individuals accountable to make sure that things are handled as we want them to be handled. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. That's exactly what happens.
I would recommend
dark hole that they go to die in, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So most phones now have this really good Zoom capability. I would recommend that maybe, because of the voice votes, they obviously are all there. You could probably see their face. Assign every single legislature a volunteer and record them. And if their mouth so much as looks like they tried to kill it, you hold them accountable. You will have the people that really support you duct taping their mouth so that they can't be accused of killing it.
Well, I will say this. Last year in a committee hearing, there was a gun sport group, T-Rex Arms, that had a cameraman came in, and when he set his camera on the side getting ready to view the vote, the chairman of the committee said, "Oh, no. We actually video these, and so therefore it's not allowed for anyone else to have a video camera, even your phone. You got to put your phones down. You can't record with cameras in this room."
There is something that I've seen all across the state of Tennessee, and it's the fact that almost everyone in the General Assembly has absolutely no testicular fortitude when it comes to the First Amendment. Next time there's a committee, call me. Make sure I got the gas money to get down there because I'm a broke man. But I will do that. And if I will force them to arrest me, creating damages, and then I will drag their happy tail into federal court and win under freedom of the press. Pro se.
So that's what we've been faced with. But again,
I'll be there to record you doing all that.
That's what we've been faced with. And of course, the other side of it is you have Moms Demand Action just floods the rooms because Bloomberg and his bunch, they bring the buses in and they pay them to provide them lunch and stuff like that. Characteristically across the board, if there is a committee hearing on a Second Amendment bill, there are about 3 of us that show up. And in the rest of the room, there's actually a picture that was taken by one of the legislators' executive assistant that has me sitting in the middle of a room full of Moms Demand Actions. I'm the only person there that ain't got a red shirt on, So the other thing is we can't get people to show up on our side. Everybody wants TFA to do the heavy lifting and get things done, but they don't want to show up in committee hearings to let the legislators know that there's actually opposition to them riding roughshod over our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, it's we deal with the same thing with journalism. I get, I'm never upset that I get tips, but like here, this guy's doing this doing this, but then you have to go through and submit 6 dozen open records requests. You get dragged through and slow walked, and they lie to you like a bad rug on the open records request. You guys have had to deal with some of that in the Covenant.
Oh, absolutely.
But we'll get into that here in just a second. I want to make sure that we cover the Memphis thing. So they've tried to pass the referendum banning the carrying of handgun without an enhanced permit. What are the other 2 referendums?
All right. The second and probably the most egregious of all of it is they say that you cannot possess, buy, transfer, or carry at all in your vehicle, period, or in your home, an assault weapon. Now, they don't define what that is, but the general assumption, it's any semi-automatic rifle. Now, if you go back and look at what the Heller case decided, they said the Second Amendment protects any firearm that is in common use. Right now, there are over 28 million AR-15s by themselves before you count AK-47s and all the rest of the semi-automatic rifles that are in private hands right now, but there are over 28 million. I would conjecture that puts them into the ambit of in common use, because if you go and look at the Catano case in 2016, what they said was that stun guns, there were 200,000 of those in the hands of private citizens, and the Supreme Court of the United States said, and that broaches the walls of the metric of being in common use. So if 200,000 is that number, I would think 28 million would certainly do it. But the city of Memphis put on their referendum that you could not possess, own, transfer, buy, sell any of those things, which are your right as an American citizen to do with a semi-automatic rifle. That's the second thing that they voted up, and had 80% of the people said they were in favor of.
I have a quick question on the common use. When did that test come about? Is that old language for the word common, or?
No, basically where we got that synopsis of the language was in 2008 in the Heller decision.
Okay.
And what he did was he went through and here's what they said in Heller. And then they reiterated in Catano and McDonald, by the way, and then in Bruin, that if your conduct implicates the Second Amendment, That means if whatever you're doing is couched in the Second Amendment, you want to carry a gun, you want to buy a gun, you want to do any of those things with a gun. If your conduct implicates the Second Amendment, then instantly the burden shifts to government to prove that its infringement comports with historical tradition.
Well, so the reason I asked about the common usage is because I think it's called the puckle gun.
Yep.
Was like almost a machine gun. It was a machine gun from like 1697.
Yep.
That was almost 100 years before we even wrote the Second Amendment. So, you hear the leftist argue sometimes that, well, it only applied to muzzle loaders, and they never even envisioned a machine gun, and that's obviously false.
Well, there's a statement that comes out of the Heller decision that Scalia made that erases all of that BS, because it says, bordering on the frivolous, it has been assumed that the Second Amendment only applies to those weapons which were in existence at the time of the founding. However, we don't treat the First Amendment that way, because the First Amendment protects modern forms of communication, and we don't treat the Fourth Amendment that way because we don't look at different methods of search, like looking through your house with a FLIR. We hold that to be sacrosanct, that you're supposed to be protected in your property and in your papers. We certainly don't do that with the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment protects all weapons, even those which were all bearable weapons, is the way he phrased it, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. Now, that's a Supreme Court ruling. That's a finding. You can't get around it. You can't walk around it and try to parse it differently. And yet what you have is people saying, well, they weren't thinking about these semi-automatic weapons that have 30-round magazines. Yes, they were. What they said was, if you can pick it up and hold it in your hand, they defined it in Heller. They said anything that a person can pick up and hold in his hand to strike at another in offense or defense is covered by the Second Amendment. These people don't read the Constitution. They don't read the Supreme Court cases. I, on the other hand, have spent a long time looking at them. And so when I'm up there and different legislators pull out parts and pieces and say, well, they say that you can't carry a gun that's dangerous and unusual. Well, we define that. It has to be dangerous and unusual. In Catano, they said that's a conjunctive test, that all weapons are dangerous, but we have to say that they're dangerous and unusual, because that's the ruling from Heller. And so, therefore, anything that's in common use is not unusual. And so, therefore, it falls under the ambit of the Second Amendment. But nobody wants to admit that, especially in the legislature in Tennessee.
Personally,
a moment ago, you mentioned that people don't pick up these bills and they don't read the Constitution and whatnot. And I would argue that some people probably do read it. And the ones that do read it are trying to read it to reinterpret it in their own way, to make trying to find their way around it, to interpret it. What's the word here? They're trying to interpret it to mean what they want it to mean, and seeing it through their lens. And it makes it incredibly difficult, I think, in these scenarios to...
It's not difficult at all. If you look at what Heller said, was we wrote the Constitution for the ages. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have to look at it in the terms that were understood at the time of the founding. That's what's important, not what you want it to mean today. So when we talk about a well-regulated militia, what regulated meant at that time was practiced with and sufficed in the use of any one thing. It didn't mean that the government could regulate it. It meant that the militia itself was well regulated, that it was practiced, that it knew how to use those arms.
Right. So no, I agree with you. I'm just trying to going back to all the other arguments that I've had with people. It seems like they always have these other interpretations of, say, what the Second Amendment actually says, and they try to even go so far. I think Radiolab had a whole series where they were talking about the comma placement in the Second Amendment and how that makes a big difference about how it could be interpreted. I'm like, this is ridiculous, you guys.
Well, you need to go back to Heller, because it spends a great deal of time talking about the operative and the prefatory clauses.
Yeah.
And so what it does, it defines from some of the smartest people in the United States, the highest jurists that we have. They go through it and say, that's a bunch of hogwash. because what it boils down to is a well-regulated militia is necessary. Okay.
Didn't they
Then
call
the operative clause says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the only time those 4 words are used anywhere in the Constitution of any state or union, period. So it was paramount and important that they not infringe it. Now, we as people hang around and let the government infringe us all the time. And we do it because we think, oh, well, that's good for, safety. And government owes no safety to you at all. They're not in the business of providing security or safety. There are 20 different Supreme Court cases that will say blatantly and out front, government owes no duty whatsoever to provide protection, safety, or security to any individual, period. You're on your own. That's what the Second Amendment's about. So when people try to parse this mess, they're lying is what they're doing.
I feel like there's also a large, when you talk about like killing the constitutional carry bills and stuff like that, I feel like some of the law enforcement, not the rank and file law enforcement, but the nonprofits, the unions, the associations, from what I remember, they were pretty big in opposition because they'd lose their right to ID anybody with a gun, basically.
You can go to my website, www.tennesseefirearms.com, and you can read the news articles from that, or you can go to our YouTube page, Tennessee Firearms Association, and you can see the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee 4 years ago talking about, boys and girls, let me explain, the people who have fought us every time we have tried to raise an issue to bring us back to the true meaning of the Constitution with respect to the Second Amendment. We find that the Sheriff's Association, the Chiefs of Police, the Department of Safety, and the TBI have been the biggest operatives in trying to keep that from happening. Now, it would be different if they had any constitutional or statutory obligation to provide safety or security for us, but what it boils down to is they carry guns for their safety so they can get home at night, but they don't want you to be able to carry guns so that you can get home to your family at night. That's just a fact, and you can't parse it any other way. When the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee admits that out loud on camera, that means it's so. It's not just me talking, but that was the chairman of the committee.
To them, not every citizen deserves civil rights, just the ones that they think deserve them.
That is correct. Now, rank and file guys out here, they want every one of us carrying a gun because it makes their lives safer and it makes their jobs easier. What you find, like you said, is the associations. I've got a number of letters from the Sheriff's Association going, when we were talking about the constitutional carry bill that they call it in 2022, we got this big letter from the Sheriff's Association. No, we love the permit system and everybody ought to have a permit. But if you go back to when we passed the first permit in 1995, they said that we'd be shooting each other over parking spots and loaves of bread if they let the average rube out here carry a firearm.
I need to ask, what year was that you've got a letter from the TSA?
From the Sheriff's Association in 2022. It's on our website. You can go find it. The
reason I ask is because I've got that check behind me from my First Amendment litigation against a sheriff in Tennessee. And I believe he was the president of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association at that time, Eddie Ferris. Let's just say, of all the cops in Tennessee, I have no problem publicly stating as a matter of fact that he is the most corrupt sheriff in the state. And I never, the way that he has treated certain individuals in that area is distasteful, disrespectful. My family's been threatened by members of their sheriff's department. And like you said, the TBI, the major law enforcement associations, no one cares to do anything. But that's a different story. What is the third referendum?
The third thing that they put on the plebiscite that they had was the ability to institute a local red flag law. And as everybody knows what a red flag law is, your ex-girlfriend from high school sees you with your wife walking down the street and it instantly makes her mad at you again. And so she calls into the sheriff's department and says, this guy's dangerous. I know he's got guns. I used to date him. I was in his house at one point. And so they come kicking your door down at 3 o'clock in the morning, shoot your dog. And when you get up thinking you've been invaded, they kill you in the hallway. And I can prove that happens because all we've got to do is go back to just this last spring when they shot that guy over there in Arkansas who was the administrator of the airport. And ATF came screaming down his hallway at dark 30 in the morning, and he thought he was getting broke into, and they killed him dead right there in his home in front of his family. So that's what a red flag law is. They take the guns and they take them under threat of killing you for it. But what they do is they leave the person most of the time. If they don't wind up having to shoot you and they're just able to cuff you and stuff you, they walk out of the house with all your guns, but they leave your chainsaws and your gasoline and your matches and your hammers
And your
and
pressure
all
cookers.
those other tools. They just simply take the guns. So that's what a red flag law is. Now,
And somehow it's incumbent upon the person to prove their innocence or prove that they're not a threat in order to receive their firearms
yeah,
back.
and you can't do that. There's no way you can do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why they're
literally, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So
And-
you wind up being disarmed because somebody didn't like the way your hair was cut. You know,
I get that a lot. One of the things that I think's really important to bring up about those red flag laws is that there's no due process. Period.
none.
You can't prove that you're not crazy. And even deeper than that, don't crazy people have a right to bear arms also, absent committing a crime and being given
No.
due process where it's restricted?
Here's what you have to understand, that under our Tennessee statutes right now, if in fact you've been prohibited by federal law from being able to possess a firearm or to keep one, then you can't have it, even if we don't have a statute in the state that says that you can't. All right. So that goes under 39-17-1307F, that says that if it's under 922G8 or 922, any of them, and the federal government says you can't have one, well, the federal government 922G8 says that if you have been judicially found incompetent, then you can't own firearms.
Now, if you tried to have just a judge, we talked about Bruce Griffey earlier, so that I'm not, let's say you tried to get Bruce Griffey as a judge to come be your expert witness on a psychological evaluation. Would the court allow that?
No, I don't think so, because he's not a doctor.
So why do they get to judicially make those decisions?
Well, what they do is, we have right now statutes on our books in Tennessee that say that you can be involuntarily committed. And so what they do, if your neighbor, if your ex-girlfriend says, I think he's a danger, law enforcement can come and pick you up. They can take you to a place where you can be evaluated for 48 hours. Down here in Jackson, Tennessee, it's called Pathways. So they haul you down to Pathways, they put you inside that, and they keep you for 2 days. If in fact the doctors at that point think it's warranted that you need to be assessed further, they can keep you up to 14 days. At that time, they have to carry you in front of a judge. You have to be allowed to mount a defense and to have counsel present, and you get to make your case at that point. But what they didn't do was they didn't go into your home and take your guns. They took the person that they thought was a danger, because no gun gets up off the table and shoots itself. No claw hammer hits their next door neighbor in the head. And so what they do is they take the person, they assess them, and if in fact then, after the doctors testify in front of the judge, they feel like that you need to be committed, that you're a danger to the community, they can lock you up. And they can keep you until such time as, in fact, the medical professionals say he's cured or he can't be cured, one of those two things. But if they come back and say, hey, we've given him treatment and we've got his lithium up and he's functioning again, they got to turn you loose and send you back and give you your opportunity to vote and have your guns.
Have you seen one of these, Richard?
Do what now?
Have you seen one of these before? This is
Absolutely. Yeah, their people are involuntary committed all the time.
Yeah, this is the new Husky AI-driven hammer that will actually get up and walk away and start hitting people.
Right. You ought to see my shop out there.
I got to keep it locked up in my shop at all times because it's known to cause problems in the neighborhood. So just be aware that is a thing.
I have an adjustable wrench that grew legs and it walks off and assaults people all the time. But I've been
Yeah,
trying to
my
catch
big steel chainsaw will do the same thing, right?
I've seen that wrench. I've seen that wrench. It's terrifying.
So
That's the whole point about the red flag laws is we have statutes right now that allow us to manage these situations. In fact, the head of the Tennessee Medical Association and I had a long conversation when the governor was trying to push this red flag thing, and he and I sat down and we went over it. He said, you're correct. We are, in fact, covered right now. We don't need this law. And if you can get the top doctor in the state of Tennessee to do that, kind of means you've got a valid argument, I would think, wouldn't you?
Before 2020, I definitely would have. Now, I find that the top doctor, I'm a little bit skeptical of. I don't know this doctor in particular, but whenever someone says top doctor, the first thing that comes to my mind now is Dr. Fauci. And,
well, I'm talking about Tennessee, not the U.S.
Yeah. It's but my other issue with that is I hear so many people, and it's so. Do you remember during COVID when we all knew that it was not going to stop infection, but it was almost like a Hegelian dialectic where they forced us to, well, it doesn't stop infection. It only reduces the likelihood of death, to where even the skeptics, in order to be believed in a public conversation, had to basically repeat the propaganda line. Like, it doesn't do that. While Biden was out there telling you that you're never going to get sick from COVID again, they came out and their studies were showing, well, you're right, it doesn't prevent infection. It just greatly reduces symptoms and makes it less likely for you to die.
And none of that was true.
And none of it was true. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing that we're being led into with this mental health argument. Because, yes, there are definitely people who, when they're a danger, society has decided probably need to be separated from society so that they don't hurt people. But absent taking the human away, as you mentioned, I would say that even a crazy person who hasn't violated any laws, even if they are blatantly crazy, if they aren't threatening people, they aren't giving direct indicators that they're going to go do something, I would argue that mentally ill people, especially those that live in a bad part of town, as a lot of them have to because of the income situation, they probably need their firearms just as bad. And I'm worried that not with organizations like yours, but with some of those, the Republicans who don't want to score a touchdown on every play, I feel like they might compromise and slip through a Trojan horse that ends up harming some of the mentally handicapped people that haven't done anything wrong just because they have a disability.
Are you familiar with the Tennessee Holler? Do you know the organization that I'm talking of?
Justin Canoe. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Justin and the young lady from the NPR tried to get me cornered up during the special session for the red flag law, and Canoe walked up and said, how does it feel to be the most feared man at the General Assembly? And I looked around and said, surely you can't be talking to me. Well, I'm the nicest guy in the room. And then he went, no, you do this and you do this. And they were talking about, this, the United States is the only place that you have these school shootings. I said, that's categorically not true. If you want to talk about the biggest loss of life, it happened in Chile in a school shooting, killed hundreds and thousands of people down there with that. And who did it? The government did. And if we want to talk about the largest loss of life in a school tragedy, it had nothing to do with a firearm. It was up in Bath, Michigan, and it was a guy set dynamite and diesel fuel under the school and burned a bunch of kids and school parents up and all. Had nothing to do with the gun. So they tried for 30 minutes to make me say something that they could hold against me. And they filmed me the whole time with 3 different cameras and NPR and all of that. And they all tried to get in it. And they had me backed up against one committee room door. And by the time we got done, we walked all the way across the foyer to the other side because I kept taking a step towards them. They didn't show any of it. And in the end, he put up a deal and said, we talked for 35 minutes with the director of the TFA today. And just like always, he refuses to compromise. And I sent him back a text and I said, dude, did you look on our website? That's what it says. No compromise. Would you expect me to do something different? So there you go.
They're leftist. Okay. Reading comprehension sometimes evades them.
Yes.
So you guys brought this suit. I've noticed that you're not the only organization who is listed as a plaintiff.
Okay. We're not. See, now TFA didn't bring the suit.
Okay.
We need to be clear about this. I had this conversation with Frederick A.G. on another situation. What we did is we joined in the suit with a plaintiff down there. We are an organization, a nonprofit that is joined in with Gun Owners of America, Gun Owners Foundation, and then the plaintiff in the case down there. And then John Harris, who is the executive director of the Tennessee Firearms Association, is the litigant who's going to argue this. So as opposed to what we did in the Gibson County case, where we are not party whatsoever, we are in fact party to it, but we're not the plaintiff in it. We've got an individual, because you have to be able to show harm, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I am listed as a party to the case because I signed the affidavit from the Tennessee Firearms Association, but I'm not actually the litigant in it. It's a gentleman down there, and I can't think of his name right now, but it's Timmerman, I believe is his name, but he doesn't have a permit, and he wants to be able to carry a firearm in the city of Memphis, as is his right under the statutes that we have right now in the state of Tennessee. And so we have filed suit down there in circuit court. And I just found out this morning that we've been given a court date. We actually show up before the judge next Friday at 9:00. And you can bet I'm going to be there with bells on for that. And so it has taken from the time we filed this Thursday a week ago until Friday of next week to get in front of the judge. But we're hoping that the first thing that we can do is get a temporary injunction. Because here's the thing. The city of Memphis knew that it was unconstitutional for them to even attempt to do this, because the statutes in Tennessee, 39, 17, 13, 14, say that they may not occupy the field with respect to the regulation of firearms, ammunition, knives, or anything. And yet they went ahead and did it. In fact, the election commission took the referendums off of the ballot, and they went and found a judge down there and said, no, I think the people of Memphis ought to be able to go ahead and vote on this. Well, okay, let's say that the people of Memphis think it's okay to steal a car. Should they be able to put that up as a referendum, say, we don't care what the state of Tennessee statute says about car theft, we're going to vote it in and say it's okay? It's exactly the same thing. There is no difference whatsoever. So what happened was that judge down there said, no, we're going to go ahead and let them vote. But now they have violated state statutes. They have violated the law. And I'm of the opinion that they have violated the Second Amendment rights as a civil right. And we'll talk about that later on if they try to enforce it. Now, what we're asking for in this suit is just simply to void everything that they did. And if they do that, they can pay our attorneys and we'll walk away. If they try to go ahead and appeal anything, or if we don't get the ruling that we want, we will take it up to the next notch. But they've got to pay our attorneys 3 times the cost every time we step to a higher court. And by the way, if we get to the appeals court or the state Supreme Court, there is no doubt we're going to win. So this is what they're trying to do, is to make Brent Taylor look bad in the city of Memphis. That's what all of this is about. By going, well, if he just paid attention to the citizens of Memphis, they don't want all these guns. And yet, what the city of Memphis can do is they can regulate the discharge of firearms within the confines of their city limits.
Well, that's worked well.
Particularly that they can do that, but they haven't been doing a very good job of that, have they?
I was going to say they have done a fantastic job. There's never a gun fired in Memphis. It's not like there's videos on the internet of drive-bys at gas stations every weekend. You know, that's not Memphis. Oh, wait, yeah, it is.
Yeah. So all these things they could be doing, but they're not. But what they want to do is they want to take and smear Brent Taylor because he's trying to, as his catchphrase is, make Memphis matter. I know Senator Taylor pretty well now. I didn't know him before all this started very much. He actually worked against me on a bill 2 years ago, and I lit him up like a small brush fire. And he said, well, if you really think you understand this, why don't you come to my office and let's talk? And I said, I'll be right there. Got in the car and drove to Nashville, and we sat down and started talking, and he found out that I was correct. So education is a big deal. And I just simply carried the statutes and the Constitution in and showed him. And so now, this last year, he voted for the same bill he tried to kill the year before. And so what he's done is he's actually started to see that more guns in the hands of lawful people result in less crime. But if you take the firearms away from the average person down there who didn't intend to commit a crime in the first place, you've simply created a stress-free work environment for criminals. And so now he's doing his best to help us with these situations, to put the power back in the hands of the people of Memphis.
That's something that you don't see an awful lot, are politicians that are willing to change their mind with new information.
No, that's correct. And I am so very, very happy that he allowed me the opportunity to come in and talk. Now, some people will say that I'm somewhat confident in my knowledge of the information and the situation. I would tend to agree with that because I've spent a long time studying it. And what we get is these culls that walk the halls up there. A lot of them are attorneys, and they try to parse things like the other gentleman was talking a while ago. Well, I've been with people who read it a different way. You can only read the Constitution one way. Shall not be infringed. It didn't say might not be infringed. If you go over and you look at the charge to the legislators in the state of Tennessee, they're told that before they go to business, that they have to take an oath that they will vote without affection, partiality, or prejudice, and they will assent to no bill, resolution, or thing whatever which would appear injurious to the people's ability to enjoy the rights and privileges enumerated in the Declaration of Rights. Now, if they're going to vote without partiality or prejudice, why would they then not want to read what the Constitution actually says instead of what the Chamber of Commerce might tell them they want it to say?
Here's my issue that I see, and I want to go back in just a second and ask about more of the standing grounds, but I just don't see that there's any recourse, or very little recourse, when it comes to these public officials, whether it be a city, a county, or even a state legislature. There's almost no recourse. If you can find an attorney, if you were not physically injured, then you're out of luck unless you want to pay the attorney up front $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and they will get, a lot of the time they will get their attorney's fees back, but you won't get anything for going through it. And there's no, I've got, I think it's 22 censorship cases right now that I could file in federal court, and I know for a fact I'm very good at this. I lay the trap and spring it on them. But without an attorney, the max damages, even with punitive damages for a censorship case, are looking at about $10,000.
Right.
The municipality will drag a $10,000 debt out for 3 years to bankrupt me as an individual fighting it, or to hope that I mess up on one of the motions to dismiss or one of those.
Well, you're going about it wrong. What you need to be doing is going in and talking to the DA of the county where this occurred, because you have to file this next thing within the area that the crime occurred. It's 39-16-402 or 39-16-403. Article 1, Section 2 of the Tennessee Constitution says that government, being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. Now, if they talk about official oppression is anathema to liberty, then you go over to 39-16-402. It says any taxpayer-paid individual who, under color of their official employment, denies or attempts to deny a citizen their right as enumerated in the Constitution is guilty of official oppression. That is a Class E felony, and it can only be brought by a district attorney. You're going to have to write it up and carry it in, but the DA in that area has got to let you in front of a grand jury. And so if you can argue well enough, you can go in there pro se. You don't have to have an attorney. And so if you can't get the grand jury to indict the individual,
so it's not your rights. The reason I asked, so this is not like official misconduct where only the district attorney can bring the charge in front of the grand jury, or is it?
No, it's not the district attorney doesn't get to do it. He has to let you. That's the way the rules work. The problem of it is 99% of the people have never read enough and they haven't been told enough about what the rules are to know how to navigate these things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so anybody that can put together a decent writ of evidence can go to the DA and say, I want to get in front of the grand jury.
Now,
they have to allow you to do that. They
I
must.
Have a question.
It's not a situation where they might think, okay, maybe.
Which DA then would you have to go go after the Tennessee District Attorney General's conference for violation of First Amendment rights?
More than likely, that would have to be in Nashville because that's where their office is, I would imagine.
What if it's the local district attorney?
Okay, well, the local district attorney in Nashville is Glenn Funk, and he hates Republicans with an absolute passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I threatened several times to go up there and carry a writ in, see if I couldn't get the grand jury in Nashville and to indict a number of Republican officials in Nashville, because that's where you got to go. And my friends who are good, staunch, solid Republican district attorneys in different counties, people that I know and trust, are going, you can't, well, you could, but you're not going to make any friends. And I said, well, I haven't got any friends now. What's that going to do? It's going to cost me people not voting for my bills. I've been fighting this mess for 30 years and can't get it done. So what's that going to do? So if in fact you have the evidence and you want to go before the grand jury, you have that delegated power by the Constitution to be able to do that.
I am the last question I have on that regard is, what would you do if it were in fact the district attorney, not the district attorney because like I said, there's 22 cases, there's a lot. Well, what would you do if it were in fact the district attorney hiding or censoring cases? Who do you go after to get?
You go after that district attorney because he is a public official that draws his paycheck from the public treasury, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it says. That's official misconduct because he cannot try to deny you. He can't do it, and he can't try to deny you your constitutional rights. And if he does, he's guilty of official misconduct and probably in addition to official oppression. It was so important to the founders of this state that they put it in the second line of the Declaration of Rights. Now, number one, let's go back and see what it says. All power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. That's pretty powerful, don't you think?
I do. The problem that I deal with is a lot of people on the establishment Republican side don't like me, so they don't give me any of that support. And the liberals, we literally got Stalin out of a hate video yesterday. They blacked out mine and Daniel's face so that they didn't give us any publicity while making fun of a guest. And I obviously know, because I've had to file it pro se before, that there's a reason attorneys charge so much money. It's because it's a lot of work and requires a lot of knowledge. And the problem that I deal with, the people that watch my show are everyday, blue-collar, average people. A lot of them were actually victimized at some point by a government official, and that's when they woke up to the fact that your government officials oftentimes don't have your best interest at heart. And I hope what you just gave me in terms of that statute, I'm going to look into that, and there are going to be some people that really, really hate your guts if that's good, because I am a pit bull and will absolutely, I have the testicular fortitude to do just about anything. And
I have espoused this very thing in the halls of the General Assembly, and I've been told, if you try to pull this off, you'll never get back in another door. And I said, no, I can talk to you in the hall then.
If it works, Chase, I think you and I would probably be putting together a good tutorial and detailing and documenting how to do it.
Yeah, not just that, because that's the thing, is it's not It's not being able to do it yourself. It's being able to teach other people how to do it, because alone we will never do it. You've been doing this even in a group for 30 years, and it's a tough fight. The only way to make it easier is to get more people in the fight.
Well, and the other side, we have decided that it probably will not pay us, and we will not achieve our ends if we continue to go to the legislature and kiss their rear ends and beg and plead to try to get them to change legislation. What we've got to do is we've got to go to court and we've got to sue them, because that's the only thing that matters. Right now, we've got the Loper Bright case. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard
that was the knife in the heart of Chevron deference, which is the Chevron deference was years and years and years ago.
That's
a very liberal Supreme Court said, well, if the legislature don't pass a bill that directly talks about a specific issue, then the three-letter agency that deals with that, we're going to give them deference. And this was in the case with Chevron, who's an oil company. And so what they did was they allowed the EPA to write the rules to make the law. And so what that did is that started branching out everywhere. And the worst group of that is ATF. Mm-hmm. And so ATF has promulgated all of these rules over the years. But if you look, the bump stock, we just defeated them on that. Mm-hmm. We're defeating them on the force reset triggers. We defeated them on the brace for AR and AK pistols. What we've decided to do is start going to court, because what we've got now is a Supreme Court that is relatively conservative, that actually looks at the text and the history, which is the rule book for how they're supposed to treat with anything Second Amendment. And so therefore we've decided what we're going to do is, just like this case in Memphis, just like the one up in Gibson County, we're not going to go talk to the legislature anymore. It's not going to do us any good. They're not going to change their spots. Leopards don't do that. But if you go to court, and I'll give you a for instance. There was a case up in East Tennessee. Firearms Policy Coalition sued the state of Tennessee about 18 to 20-year-olds being able to carry handguns for self-protection. And they argued before the federal court in the Eastern District of Knoxville up there, that if you can force an 18-year-old to carry a firearm to protect the Republic, why can't you allow him to carry a firearm to protect himself? And so finally, Skermetti, the new Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, said, you know what? I'm not going to defend the state of Tennessee against that. I'm going to concur that they're correct, because the challenge to scheme of Tennessee denying 18 to 20-year-olds the ability to carry a handgun or to perfect a permit to do the same is a violation of the second, and wait for it, the 14th Amendment. And so we're simply going to acquiesce to that. And once the federal court came down with that ruling after he agreed to it, that was 2 years ago, and we still don't have a codification by the General Assembly. They have not passed that. And so you got folks in Memphis that are saying, hey, the statute still says you got to be 21. And so if we catch you with the firearm down here, we're going to arrest you if you're 18. That's not the law, but that's what they're saying they're going to do. And so the only way to stop that is to go back to court and get them spanked harder. So what we did in the case up in Gibson County, we didn't just sue the director of the Department of Safety. We sued the governor and the attorney general. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Article 3, Section 10, it says that the only job the governor of Tennessee has got is to faithfully enforce the laws of this state. Well, that's his only charge. He's doing, and yet what he tries to do is he tries to be in charge of education. He tries to be in charge of the budget. But the only thing that he's responsible to do by the Constitution is to faithfully enforce the laws of the state. And so when we got in front of that 3-judge panel and the AG came down and said, well, you can't sue the governor and you can't sue the attorney general of Tennessee. 3-judge panel said, absolutely you can. That's who you got to sue, because you're the people responsible for enforcing the law. And so that was the first thing, and now we've gone back and we'll go into court again, probably in January, to try to get the rest of it done. But we've learned that the only way we're going to win this issue is to go to trial and to go in front of a judge. And most of the time you're not going to get a jury, but I'd love to get in front of a jury with it.
Just out of curiosity, when the Chevron deference thing was changed, what was that like for you guys at the TFA? Like, what was that?
Oh
moment?
man, we jumped up and down and danced. I guarantee it, because we knew at that point, hey, if you've ever watched some of the videos that I do, we talk about the director of the TBI. In committee, he was testifying that, and this was on the bill to allow long guns into the permissible class of weapons. And by the way, there was never a law in the state of Tennessee saying it was illegal to carry a long gun loaded until 1989. Does that comport with Bruin? It does not, because 1989 is way away from 1791, isn't it? So if it was lawful for people in the state of Tennessee to carry a long gun loaded up until 1989, what changed at that point, except that the Democrats who were in charge at that point intended to do stuff that would make the general population want to shoot them, so they wanted to make sure they didn't have the tools to do that with.
Doesn't surprise me.
So
does not surprise me at all.
With Chevron deference now, what that being gone, that means that the Department of Safety can't make rules, that the TBI can't make rules, that the Sheriff's Association can't make rules. If, in fact, they want to pass a law that restricts your stuff in Tennessee, the legislature has to do it. And then we can hold them accountable for it every 2 years, because House members have got to face the public every 2 years. And what they were doing, they were going, well, I'm not really responsible for that because the Department of Safety makes these rules up. Now, hey, I didn't pass that law. That's not the way it is anymore.
Yeah.
That's the reason the Loper Bright case was so important.
Awesome. I had a feeling there was a champagne popping kind of moment for you guys, especially.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I was just curious what that was like.
So when you're talking about the standing that you have in this case, obviously, you clarified that you're not a plaintiff. So how do you get beyond that? Are you still able to claim injury?
Well, we have a plaintiff who can claim injury. And so standing requires two things, three, but two things mainly, is that you can prove that there is harm to you if the regulation stays in effect. Well, Mr. Timmerman down there, who's, and I hope I've got that name right, might not, I'd have to look it back up. But what he's saying is, I don't have a permit and Memphis is a dangerous place. And if you don't allow me, the state's already said that I could do this. And by the way, if anybody's read the Pennsylvania case that came from their Supreme Court 3 weeks ago, it talks about this very issue. And Pittsburgh tried to pass a law like this, and the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania said, no, hold on, boys and girls, you can't do that. Because people who live in Pittsburgh are actually members of the state of Tennessee, and we have a state preemption law, and so therefore we don't care what you think. If you want to change these laws, you're going to have to go to the General Assembly of Pennsylvania, to the Commonwealth up there. You have to get it changed there and get the governor to sign it, because you don't have the power, because the state preempts home rule. That's exactly what you got in Memphis. They're going to lose. They have to lose because they have violated state law. And they've attempted to deny constitutional rights to the people that pay them.
Is there no, like you said, it was obvious that this was virtue signaling, or it's some kind of political ammo for the future so that they can run and say 80% of people support this.
Yeah.
Two things. Is there any recourse for the people who are blatantly just wasting money? Because when they lose and they have to pay y'all's attorney's fees, that's taxpayer money that they have just thrown away. And they have not, I would argue that is at best nonfeasance, if not malfeasance, deliberately.
It is malfeasance. It absolutely is.
The second question that I have is, this election took place November the 5th. And then what was it? November the 7th, November the 9th, something like that. TBI Director Roush came out and said, well, you know what? The Venezuelan gangs are actually here, including in Memphis. That to me, he didn't just discover that 2 days after the election. And so he obviously withheld it from people, which I think is probably bad anyway.
Well, see, that wasn't the most egregious thing he talked about, and everybody else has missed this. But you didn't see the part when he was talking about wanting to go in and start testing the sewer systems.
We actually talked about that on the show this last Friday, and they want to test it for drug users, not sales. They can't find out any, but like when you look at it, they can narrow it down, they say, to 4 houses. It's completely overstepping. This is Brave New World type of stuff.
Well, but here's the thing. If you look at the Fourth Amendment, that's an egregious violation of the Fourth Amendment. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think he talked to anybody with any sense whatsoever or knowledge of the Constitution or the rights of the people. They just decided and see, here's the other thing. They was fixing to ask for more money to do that because right now they're strapped for cash. You know, they can't pay everybody because how long did it take to get a rape kit done in Tennessee and all that kind of stuff? So they just ain't got a lot of money. So they're in there asking for more appropriations to violate the Fourth Amendment. I had to come apart on that. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. What they need to be doing is standing out here on the streets and trying to stop the drugs from getting in, not trying to go through my potty and find out whether somebody who might have come into my house and used my bathroom, then they're going to come kick my door in at 2 o'clock in the morning and shoot my dog and me in my hall? Come on. That is absolutely overreaching. It's just, I can't tell you how badly that upset me. And if it doesn't upset everybody, they got soft spots in their head.
Not just that, they're also doing it. They're trying to do this to test high school students. And we went through, there's no way on God's green earth, unless every kid in the school's doing drugs, that you're going to be able to get any useful information. You know, how many kids use a bathroom?
You have to have a warrant to even ask for DNA or to take bodily fluids and all that. And what they're trying to do is to get around the warrantless search deal.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you, like the flush, they're going to be able to tell that flush coming down that pipe. I don't know. I've been in construction my whole life. I've had to dig up sewer lines. Let me tell you what they look like. And there's no possible way that they could differentiate between one person and the next. That is absolutely ludicrous. And on its face, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And it just astounds me that they would have the effrontery to walk up there and sit down in front of a camera and try to run that trash.
Well, I'm not really.
Me, you know, a lot of people say the problem with me is you don't know where I stand.
I don't think anyone's ever said that. So what are some other things that you guys you're obviously expecting to win this case?
Yes.
But this isn't the only lawsuit that I imagine is still somewhat ongoing. You guys were also very involved in the Covenant Manifesto, weren't you?
Well, now, TFA in itself is not a plaintiff in that one, but John Harris, again, for Judicial Watch, is counsel for them. And so he argues for them. And that, again, that's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever seen. Everything that the police department has up there right now was the product of taxpayer money, right? Mm-hmm. And so the taxpayers ought to be able to see it because it has a direct bearing on safety, security, and how we move forward. But for some judge to sit up there and say, no, I'm going to hold that in abeyance and not let y'all see what it was and not let you know the dangers that are actually out there is, again, an egregious violation of what they owe us as a responsibility of a taxpayer-paid person.
Yeah. That
judge that's sitting up there on top of this stuff and by the way, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee is a private entity that has sued the state over that to release that. So it's not just Judicial Watch and not just the parents of some of the kids that got killed who want to know, or the rest of the people out here like the Tennessee Star. And by the way, the mess has already been released, and you'll notice they hadn't arrested anybody because they turned it loose. Mm-hmm. This whole thing is virtue signaling again, but that information belongs to the people of the state of Tennessee, and it is a violation of their rights to sit on top of it and not let us see what, why, and how this was accomplished.
But not just that, it's the fact that they've gone through. It's quite obvious that is public record. Anyone can read the Tennessee Public Records Act, and
Sure.
you have to do some really big Instagram judicial cartwheels, like the judge that was, what was that, Maisha or something like that? I can't remember her name, but you have to go up there and do some really creative.
Aisha L. Miles.
Yes, you have to do some really creative. I swear this podcast is under attack from everybody. So some of the things that you talked about throughout this entire thing, we've got judges that have no problem making rulings in the Covenant shooting. You got judges that have no problem allowing these unconstitutional referendums on the ballot. You have public officials who have no problem putting it on the ballot. You have, like we mentioned with the Tennessee Sheriffs Association, opposing the stuff. You have the TBI, obviously withholding information from people before an election that would have made a major difference. I should imagine that if the people in Memphis knew that there were Venezuelan gangs in their city, less people would have supported it. It may still have passed, but all of that. Then, you touched on the ATF and all that, and I just thought it might be important for you to know that the president of the Tennessee Sheriff's Association back then, Eddie Ferris, his dad owns a pawn shop that was shut down by the ATF for, among many things, firearms with filed off or hammered out with a die punch serial numbers, and Glock automatic conversion kits bought from China during that ATF investigation on some website out of China that involved PayPal.
I had a state legislator talk to me a day about could we help them craft a bill that would make it illegal in Memphis to own a Glock switch. And I said, why would you need to do that? All you got to do is go to Tennessee Code Annotated 3917, 1307 F. And it says that anything that's against the law federally is against the law in the state, and we can prosecute you for it. So why would you need to make another law? Why don't you just have the police do their job?
Yep.
And the DAs down there do their job. Just do your job. You've already got the tools. Why do you need to stack regulation on top of regulation on top of regulation? Because, again, what that is virtue signal. We're trying to do something. No, you can do it now. Go do your dang job.
Unfortunately, I think most of them are way too busy campaigning for re-election and, brown nosing up to what I call the chosen sperm to try to be effective. It's something else I kind of wanted to touch on was the Tennessee 3 and their whole shutting down the General Assembly with the protest and the megaphones and all that stuff, and how the conservatives handled that. Because that was right before the red flag laws, where they took a 3-month break for a special session, which a special session normally needs to be something that's urgent and imperative to get passed. So why we decide to hold one and then wait 3 months baffles me. But it's easily explained with the need to fundraise. And I was wondering if you could. I'm convinced, but maybe you can change my mind if I'm wrong. I'm convinced that at least a small group of the establishment Republicans knew that the Tennessee 3 would immediately get put back in, just like what happened. So originally, and I saw this on Facebook, for the first about 12 hours that it happened, nobody was giving any credibility or any credence to the idea of removing them because they knew what would happen. They'd just come right back. Mm-hmm. Then some of the other establishment people really started pressing on it. And then all of a sudden they came back and they kicked them out, which gave them gave all the Democrats a platform on a national media. They racked up tens of thousands of dollars.
Millions.
Probably millions. Yeah, I saw one like GoFundMe that had been recycled around with like $60-something thousand in it. But yes, definitely when you get, as a Democrat, if you get President Joe Biden say, hey, look at these people, you're going to get loads of money.
Right.
But you know what it also did is it gave, I can't remember the name of the group and I don't want to say it wrong, but there was a group that basically started up right around the time of the red flag laws and had these events that helped all your establishment Republicans campaign and fundraise. Hey, we need more money. They're going to fight real hard. We need more money. We need more money. And just from someone who's in and out of this all the time, it screams, well, you know what? It screams like they had two options. They knew that they could just tell him off and nothing would happen, like, hey, we're not going to kick you out because you'll come back in, but that was really bad. You embarrassed us all, yada, yada, yada. Make him feel about this big. Or the other option is they could make a big deal out of it, kick him out, and then they could fundraise for 3 months on this special session. And I think the Republicans probably raised millions of dollars during that time, too.
There was some fundraising that took place. I was involved in some of that because we fundraised to be able to get in there to defeat that red flag situation.
Well, just to add clarification, I don't think that everyone who opposed it was in on it. I think that it was call them the top 12 or the top 10, whoever the squad is in the Republican establishment. I think probably the same people that were in that meeting with Jack Johnson when he said something about, we got to rebrand red flag laws. I would imagine it had something to do with that. Again, it's still speculation, but it is an educated guess and not a bad strategy if you're a strategist for them.
Well, and the thing I do is I tell everybody, look that gift horse in the mouth every time. From my perspective, I've been walking the halls of the General Assembly for the last 25 years. I know most of the players. I've seen the people rise to power from where they are. I've been promised and stabbed in the back. I've got all kind of scars between my shoulder blades. And what you do is you go out and you work for the guy that tells you, hey, if you can just get me elected, you're going to get what you want. And you do that. And then when they get elected, they change their tune instantly. And say, well, the political reality is, I remember a legislator told me, he said, you just don't understand how the sausage is made. And I said, dude, let me explain something to you. I grew up on a pig farm. I have made more sausage than you're ever going to be able to be around. So I understand being elbow deep in it, okay? Don't tell me I don't know how the sausage is made. It boils down to this. Money talks and BS walks at the General Assembly. Mm-hmm. Money is the mother's milk of every legislator up there. Now, a lot of them come in with great intent, and they're going to set the world on fire, and they're going to do the right thing. And then I was in a meeting with a group of freshmen 2 years ago. And some of my good friends in the legislature set it up for me to come in and talk to them about the Second Amendment and the Tennessee Constitution. And a member of the leadership came into that meeting, and he had no idea who I was. I'd never spoken with him before. And he started off by saying, well, now you fire breathers coming in here, you need to understand, you can't just walk in here and get something passed that first year. What you need to do is sit around outside the walls and watch us old hands, because we understand that. And so you don't need to try to get anything done this first year. You just need to kind of sit back and learn from us. And I took my copy of the Tennessee Constitution and tossed it down the table, and I said, can you show me where in that document it says that?
You handled that much better.
He looked at me and he said, in what district are you? And I said, I didn't get elected nowhere. I asked you a question because you were espousing that's the rule. Show me where it says that.
You're a better man than I am, because I'd have probably just told him exactly how I felt about his.
Well, I kind of semi-did. And a good friend of mine who's a legislator was sitting beside me, saw what was fixing to happen, and reached over and caught my jacket sleeve like my wife at church. And I told her to turn loose of me. I ain't married to you. I'm fixing to have my say. So when we got done, I waited about 2 weeks and went back to this gentleman's office. I said, now, I wasn't trying to belittle you, but I was speaking truth. And he said, I get it. I understand. And he's actually been a lot more friendly to our cause ever since then, because what we did was we laid out facts, and this is what the Constitution says, and this is your obligation, and this is what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And nobody challenges them on that stuff. And the problem of it is they get to work in an echo chamber up there because nobody shows up to tell them any different. I'm not. Here's the thing. I'm going to die, and then when I meet my creator, I'm going to have to talk about the things that I've done or not done. I'm going to be convicted of sins of commission and not sins of omission. I can promise you that, because one's just as bad as the other.
Yeah, it is. How long do you think this litigation is going to take?
That's a really tough question. Will we ever get where we need to be? I'm not sure.
I meant specifically with Memphis.
Oh, Memphis. I think that we'll be done with this lawsuit very shortly, because I think what they've done is they've counseled with their attorneys down there, and the guy that's their attorney, who is actually not an elected individual, is somebody that they pay, has probably sat down and looked at it and said, it's a losing proposition, because the further you go with this, the more it's going to cost the city of Memphis. And if it gets up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, y'all going to look like Hattie's rear end. And so what you need to do is back off this, because you knew it was wrong in the first place. I think what we're going to see is them capitulate to this. If it goes anywhere, I think it will go to the appellate court. But you need to remember, if you look at the Columbia case from 2 years ago, they had a young man who was a person who lived in government supplied housing or assisted housing. And they made him sign a document that he would not have any firearms in that location to get the government assistance to live there. He said when Bruin came out, he said, I don't think y'all can do that, because it says that I've got an unalienable and indefeasible right to have a firearm for my protection, because you don't provide it. And this place is dangerous. They steal cars out of the parking lot all the time. I'm going to have a gun. They said, okay, if you do that, we're going to throw you out because you signed a document. And the chief judge from the appellate court of the state of Tennessee, whose father was a Democrat governor, ruled thus. He said, you cannot under any circumstances take away the right of a person if it is codified in the Constitution. And they made them put him back in that apartment and pay for his legal fees. And so if our appellate court, which has not changed, it's the same people up there, ruled in that case that way, I know how they're going to rule in this one. Ain't any doubt that this is a no-brainer. And so the sooner they cut their losses, the less money it's going to cost them and the less bad they look. Now, personally, I hope they push it all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court. If they keep appealing all the way up, that just means that they're going to pay us a lot more money.
It sounds like at this point, the Memphis case is already at foregone conclusion. And at this point, we're just going through the motions.
That's correct. It is. Now, of course, if they hand a ruling down and give us a temporary injunction, they can appeal. That's their right to do that. And when they appeal, we go to the next jury or next judge and the next higher court. And like I said, they can push it all the way to the Supreme Court. They can't push it any further than that. But it will cost them so much and it will make them look so bad. I just can't see why they would do that.
Now, I'm curious.
That's up to them, not me.
I'm curious because I know this is a state action or state level court that you're at. Is there any standing? Could you have pursued litigation in federal court because there is the Second Amendment of the Constitution?
Well, what we could do is we could file on a plaintiff down there saying that they violated his Second Amendment rights, and then we could take it to federal court.
Okay.
What we would prefer to do is handle this on a state basis and not get that deep into it. Mm-hmm. Again, there ain't no doubt that we would win that.
You'll do what you have to
10 years to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're prepared to do what you have to do, but you'd rather do it the easy way than the long drawn out.
Yes.
I am a big fan of taking it right to the top and dragging them through the streets like Lady Godiva rode through the streets of Coventry to protest taxes.
The reason we're involved in this is we don't want Knoxville and Chattanooga and Nashville to take these people and think that they can go in and start doing these things.
Hold on just 1 second. Daniel, you're doing it again. Hit mute. There we go. All right. So you don't want Memphis doing what? Or you don't want Knoxville?
I don't want Knoxville and Nashville and Chattanooga and probably Clarksville, Tennessee, to go down the same road. If they were to see Memphis be able to get by with that, instantly they would start doing the same thing. And it's just not constitutional. It's not in line with what the people of Tennessee deserve. And so therefore, we're doing this not to enrich ourselves, but to stop this from getting out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things you need to understand about Tennessee Firearms Association, John Harrison or I, either one, and we are the board of the TFA, neither one of us take a dime from the organization. When I drive somewhere to give a speech over to East Tennessee or up to Northwest Tennessee, I don't get my gas paid for. They don't pay for my hotel rooms or my meals. Everything I do, we're an all-volunteer organization, and we have some staff members that we pay to do memberships and to send out membership cards. But everything else is all volunteer. Every dime that we take in membership or in donations goes directly to our PAC, and we use that to buy good legislators or try to defeat bad ones. We have, in fact, now started a 501c3. The other group is a 501c4, and that's the one that has the PAC. 501c3 is a charity, and the mission statement of that is simply to sue the state of Tennessee for redress of grievances and to take the state back to the original construct of the 1796 constitutional Second Amendment analog. We can't use it for anything else. So we do have, if you've got a lot of money and you want to donate to an organization that's a charity that you can count off, you can send it to the TFA Foundation and actually get a tax write-off for that. Because we decided 2 years ago that we needed to start suing instead of begging.
Yeah. No, I wish I was in a position to start a nonprofit for government accountability, but I'm worried they do to me what they did to James O'Keefe. And that's the entire reason that I've done this as a business, is so that I can't be restricted by those BS political. You know, a couple of years ago, they tried saying any group that mentions a candidate's name within 60 days. Yeah. So I just went out and is this day that started, just started calling them out like, come on, sue me. Let's go. Let's go. Because like you said, you got to stop begging. Let's go hash this out in court.
That's it. That's exactly the same thing, because they tried to make PACs. They want to be able to use PACs on their side, do what they want to. There are certain individuals within the state who profess to be conservatives that will generate a PAC, and then they'll dissolve the PAC right after the election and never get to a reporting period. Mm-hmm. That's the way they do that stuff, where we've had a PAC for 25 years. And so we have to do all the reporting and all that stuff. So we play by the rules and they don't. So we've decided we'll sue them instead of, like I said, begging. We'll just go in there and spank them.
I love it. I love it. Do you have anything that you really want to take this time to talk to? You know, I do have probably about 500-600 people watch these shows, and they're all involved: mayors, state, officials. Half the people I went to school with are assistants and staff members on the General Assembly. So,
here's one of the biggest issues that I have with the state of Tennessee and the bad laws that they have generated. In 2016, they passed a law in the state of Tennessee that changed the verbiage from not being able to carry a firearm in a courtroom to not being able to carry a firearm in a courthouse. That was never a law in the state of Tennessee until 2016. I'm a big believer in Bruin, which says if it wasn't a law that was generally accepted across the board at the time of the founding, then you can't institute it now as a restriction on the people's ability to provide for their own protection. In the courtroom, if you look at what Heller said, with schools maybe and courtrooms, even though they said courthouses, what you have to do is go back and look at the state regulations, because we are, in fact, the United States of America. And so there was never a restriction in the state of Tennessee until 2016 on the ability of a lawful individual to carry a firearm to the courthouse. I intend to sue within the next year the state of Tennessee to redress that, to get it go back to what it was in 2016 and all the way back to 1796, because that's what it should be. Because now what I have to do is I have to leave my firearm in my car. And you've got TBI running ads that I'm paying for and you're paying for. So, hey, don't leave your gun in cars, because you make them a target to be stolen. And that's where criminals get their guns, is out of cars. But yet they've passed a law in 2016 that makes me leave my gun in my car when I go buy my license or pay my taxes or go in to see the county assessor.
Or go submit an open records request.
Yeah. Do any of those things, they require that I be disarmed. Now, what they're not doing is they're not taking me into custody when I leave my car. When you go into a courtroom, you're in the custody of the state, because they've got armed security guards, they got bailiffs in there or sheriff's deputies. And so they're providing protection for, and by the way, did you understand that any judge in the state of Tennessee can carry a firearm without having a permit? And he can carry them in the courtroom? Now think about these judges that we're looking at in Memphis right now that are saying, hey, we're going to turn you loose on your own recognizance down here, even though you shot 3 people out there in front of the FedEx bill. That's all right. You just keep going. We're not going to charge you any bond. We're just going to turn you. They'll let that guy carry a gun every day, all day long, anywhere he wants to go, school, courtrooms, whatever. But you or I, who have a handgun carry permit that took the course and had the background check for it, we can't do that in a courthouse.
That just happened. I think that's the law that Chris Stanford, the district attorney out of Warren County, that has been in the news over the last week because he was participating in some kind of a manhunt out of his county and ended up shooting at the suspect's car. And his argument, his statement to News Channel 5 said that the law makes it clear he's a certified law enforcement officer. It turns out he's not. And even if, in order to have that law, the law that he was referencing was the law that allows judges, district attorneys to carry their firearm in those places. You have to do mandatory firearms training.
Has to be post-certified.
Yes. Well, so you don't actually have to be post-certified. It's weird. You have to go through the firearms training. You don't necessarily have to be post-certified. You do to be technically a certified law enforcement officer. Yes. But to carry the gun like the judge is or something, the way that law's written, it doesn't actually mention post. It just mentions the firearms training. But I spoke to the post commission, and he has never completed any of those firearms training courses. No. So, but it's funny how
a DA or a judge doesn't have to have any training to carry a firearm within the confines of that courtroom or that courthouse. There's no regulation that says he has to have any training.
Hold on one
just
second.
Because he is and what they consider themselves to be law enforcement officers when they're in that building. I've asked this of a number of DAs.
Senate Bill 1340. I'm going to read this real quick. For purposes of this section, law enforcement officer refers to executive director, pro tem prosecutor, deputy director, Tennessee District Attorney General's Conference. Each elected district attorney at his or her discretion shall be authorized to determine if any employee or assistant district attorney general is authorized to carry a firearm pursuant to this section. The District Attorney General's Conference shall develop a uniform identification system, and persons authorized, hold on one second, where is this only applies to people who have successfully completed firearms training in accordance with post-certification and shall include at minimum 40 hours of initial training and 8 hours annual in-service training every year. So there might be another law.
Probably need to go back to 1366 and read what it says about judges.
Gotcha. Well, I was just thinking because the district attorneys too, and that it seems like that law is trying to treat the district attorneys the way you're describing judges can.
Yeah.
And it's so weird that these weird positions, these certain positions can be given these benefits that they don't, rules for thee, but not for me.
Well, here's the whole point of the matter is that we're not supposed to have any subsets of the people, are we?
No, that's a caste system.
That's exactly correct. We are what it says. If you are politically connected to the state or the nation, that you're a part of the people. And that was part of the ruling in Heller. It said, and so the people have the right to keep and to bear arms, period. And so what they've done is they're creating these subsets of individuals and giving them extra rights. When I pretend that it's totally unconstitutional to do so. Now, that doesn't make me popular with all these guys. And see, here's the thing that I would ask. If it's so dangerous to be a judge, why do you have a license plate on your car that says you're a judge?
Yeah.
You're driving around all over town in bad sections of town with a license plate that I'm providing you with my tax dollars says you're a judge. So you're putting a target on your back at that point. Why don't you just say, hey, we probably don't need the taxpayers to give us a license plate that says we're a judge. We can have a little sticker to get in the parking lot up there and, have a name tag that'll swipe whatever. But they give them a license plate that says they're a judge, and they wear that right on their sleeve, don't they?
Well, that just keeps them.
Or we could get them a little Pope Mobile car to drive around, taxpayer funded, since it's dangerous.
1997 Geo Metro. loaded with like phone books in the door, just, so that it's bulletproof.
I had to go to Monterrey, Mexico to do an assessment of a building. We were moving a company to Texas, pipe mill, and went down, and when the guy that picked me up, when I started to shut the door in his BMW, I said, my goodness, that door is heavy. So, oh yes. So this is rated for 30-06. They drive around down there with bulletproof vehicles that will stand 30-06s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we want to provide that to our judges here just because they're judges? It's kind of like a police officer. His job's dangerous. They know that when they sign up, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love my police officers. I've got family that are state troopers. These guys, I wouldn't have their job, and we sleep safe in our beds at night because rough men stand ready to deal violence to those who would do us harm. This is true. And all these people want to defund the police are out of their minds. Do we have bad police officers? Yes, there are a few, but there's bad judges, there's bad painters, there's bad concrete finishers. And so
I think the problem with law enforcement, because my dad was a cop before he moved to America. And like during COVID, I was at a lot of protests, and I spoke with a lot of rank and file. When I was I went to Nashville during the mask lockdowns and gave brown shirts to the mask police so that they understood exactly their role in history. And the average rank and file officers supported me, but they will all flat out tell you that if you're in law enforcement, it's the shit that floats. It's the bad people that get promoted. Officer Burke ended up being like the sergeant over the mask police, and he was trying to detain me. He was going to arrest me for not social distancing. And what I see is the district attorneys a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, there's this club, especially in the law enforcement community, and the people that are just trying to do right, they aren't very popular in the club because there's no benefit to just doing what's right. And it's all the people that, become the chief of police and the head deputy a lot of the time that are the bad ones. And that's what I see from my unique perspective, as well as like looking back.
I'm very lucky in the area that I'm in. My DA in the district that I'm in, Jody Pickens, is one of the finest individuals you'll ever want to meet. He and I argue all the time, and you go, Archie, you see things different than, and then what I'll do is I'll sit down and I'll give him chapter and verse, and then I'll have to think about that. And so he will at least do that. Mm-hmm. But to the man, the people that I know, and my sheriffs and my police officers down here in this part of the world, when they went to Jody Pickens' house over a drug dealer that he put in jail, and they put up lights on the outside of his house, and they protested out there, and they had hundreds of people out in front. And I called Jody and I said, you need me to come over and provide cover fire or help? And he said, I wondered when you were going to call. I've got it covered, but I appreciate the fact that you were willing to offer that, because what we've got to do as people is we have to stand together with those that are worthy of our effort. And so again, I don't do what I do for money. It costs me a lot of money, and it aggravates my family, and it nearly costs me my job a number of times because of all the time. I spent all of my vacation for years going to the legislature. I didn't take my family to the beach. I went to the legislature because it was vitally important to me that my granddaughters coming up and my grandson have an opportunity to live in a place of liberty. And if we sit on our hands and let these colds at Nashville have their way, they're going to take it every bit. And so my entreaty to everybody out there that might be listening, get involved. Educate yourself. Read the Constitution. Go to 39:17 and read that whole statute. That's weapons, and that's the criminal aspect of what the state wants to do to you about your ability to own a firearm. It ain't going to take you long, but you need to read it, and you need to understand it. And read the Constitution. We have Thomas Jefferson said, when they took the original construct of the Tennessee Constitution to Washington, that it was the least imperfect and the most Republican, and that's not a party. What he was talking about, the form of government that we have, where you have a rule book put forward, and then that's what the powers that you delegate to those individuals have to operate by. It is, in fact, a roadmap for government.
He said that describing the Tennessee Constitution after, because originally the proposed 14th state was the state of Franklin.
Correct.
And it did not go through. Then you had like the Watauga Association. There's some disagreement on whether or not it was truly a sovereign nation. I would argue from what I've read that it 100% was. People don't go into an area they're not allowed to go to, buy land and set up rules to not be sovereign. But some of the more liberal professors disagree. But I think that when you look at the way the Tennessee Constitution was founded, that it was founded by people who generally they knew they could not rely on the government, and so they truly established a bare set of rules for which the government could serve the people. And unfortunately, I think it's kind of grown well beyond that.
Well, what the Constitution that they generated was simply a contract amongst the people, and it was a written set of hiring practices for the servants that we need to do the business of government. You have to understand that the first governor of the state of Tennessee, Nola Chucky Jack, John Sevier, what did he do? He mortgaged his farm during the Revolutionary War to provide beans and bacon to the Over Mountain men to march across the mountains to Kings Mountain, South Carolina to shoot Ferguson. And when they got done, they cut his head off, dropped his lifeless body on the ground, and they simply went home because they were just men who wanted to be left alone. They wanted to order and rule their own lives. And so when he and the rest of the people got together to write the Tennessee Constitution, they made the state of Tennessee one where the people had the power, and the servants that they hired for government were weaker by far. They had to be couched in the will of the people, and they said, if you don't like what government's doing, throw them out and get you some more. The governor of Tennessee is the weakest governor in the nation. That is provable by the simple fact that it only takes the same number of votes to override a veto of the governor that it took to pass the bill in the first place. A lot of states require a 2/3 majority to override that veto. That's not what our founders, who sacrificed their blood and treasure to give to their issue, liberty. And in every scuffle for liberty, Tennesseans have stood at the front of the line with their personal rifles to shot. The reason they call us the Tennessee Volunteers doesn't have nothing to do with the football team in Knoxville. It's because we showed up with our guns willing to go shoot people who were trying to take our liberty away from us. That's a fact. Nobody wants to talk about it anymore, but that's a fact.
Tennessee was literally built by Billy Badasses who had had enough.
Absolutely.
Yep. And, well, it's exciting to know that, it's exciting to speak to someone that is so knowledgeable in the Constitution. You don't see that a lot. Our education system is very clearly flawed. And I really hope that some of this like recent awakening that we've somewhat experienced with the growth of social media, podcasts, long form discussions and things like that, that we can start to actually affect change, real constitutional change, and shrink the government. Though I think that is a definitely going to be an uphill battle. That's the only way we can preserve this liberty that they carved out for us 200 years ago.
If I might, we had a constitutional amendment that I've been working on for 10 years in Tennessee to go back to the original construct of the Second Amendment analog, which originally said in 1796, the free men of this state have the right to keep and to bear arms for their common defense. Now, they put this, however, the legislature shall have power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime in 1870, like I said. So I put this up. Jay Reedy was the House sponsor, and John Stevens was the Senate sponsor. We ran it in the Senate this time first because the committees in the House said, we're going to do everything gun-related at the very end of session. We're not going to talk about this now because looking at the Covenant shooting and everybody's still, raw and sore from that. It's okay, so you're going to deny constitutional rights because some people's feelings are hurt. Okay, but we'll wait to the end of session. But I went ahead and ran it in the Senate, and I got up and testified, and the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee says, characteristically, I don't allow things to come through here that change the Tennessee Constitution. But Mr. Archie, you make a compelling case for this. And I think that you're correct that what we have right now is in fact a Jim Crow law. And so therefore I'm going to vote first, and I'm going to vote aye. And every Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee voted for the resolution that would put that on our constitutional amendment in 2026 to let the people vote for it. They went to the floor of the Senate, and every Republican senator voted for it. They engrossed it and sent it to the House, and the House killed it without even taking it up, after promising us the year before that we would take it off right after Covenant, that they'd make sure that we got it through the next year. Well, so I've had the promises. Like I said, I've got the scars in my back from all that. And so why the House did not take that up is beyond my capacity to understand. Well, I'm not done. I'm going to run it again this year.
From what I understand, the letter H in the word politician stands for honesty. That might explain.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Do you have any closing thoughts, or for, I guess, Daniel, do you have any questions before we wrap up and let Mr. Archie get to enjoying his pre-Thanksgiving events?
No questions, man. I think you've been very, very thorough on all your answers so far, and I appreciate having you on today. It's been very interesting to get this education.
My whole deal is to educate, and because one of these days they're going to throw me in a box and put dirt on top of me. And again, like I said, when I meet my creator, I want to be able to say honestly that I did everything I could every day to support and defend the Constitution of the state and the rights of my issue going forward. That's what my grandfather, the old Marine, told me was my job, and I take that seriously. So that's what I do. It's not for personal aggrandizement. You know, I'm thinning hair. I'm 70 years old. It hurts me to get in the car and drive 2.5 hours to Nashville at 4 o'clock in the morning to get there in time to go into committee. But I'm going to keep doing it as long as the good Lord spares me and I can get up and go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What we're going to do, we're going to put you full screen, and we're going to let you do a nice little final shout out. So if there's anything you want to tell the audience, please tell them where they can find you and how they can support the Tennessee Firearms Association and the foundation if they're looking for a tax write-off.
That is correct. Our website is www.tennesseefirearms.com. You can go there, and even if you're a member or not, there's a spot on the deal that you can subscribe to emails that we send out periodically, and especially during session to let you know what's happening each week. We send an email that shows which bills are there, whether we are for them or against them, who the sponsors are and where they're at in committee and what's going on. The TFA Foundation is a 501c3 that we use the money that comes into that strictly for suing the state of Tennessee to get your rights back. The 501c4, which is the TFA, is a group that has a PAC that we use to try to enhance the General Assembly to see if we can't get them to see things our way. The main thing that we have to have people do is to call and to email their representatives. If you look at our website and you keep up with the emails that we send out during the Legislative Assembly session, we need help in making sure that they know that the people are watching, because sunlight and light on these coals up there is the only thing that's going to change it. If they think that they're operating without any light on them whatsoever, they don't have to worry about doing the right thing. If they know that we're watching, they've got to do different, because the main thing a politician wants to do is get reelected. And so therefore, if we hold them accountable, we can change the metric in Tennessee back to what it should be, not what we want it to be. So Tennessee Firearms Association, we're, again, nonprofit. None of us get paid anything. And anybody that wants to help, we will certainly take your assistance.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really encourage everyone to go check that out. At least sign up for their newsletter. If you're looking for a tax write-off, again, support their foundation. This is one of the real groups in Tennessee that is doing the right thing. So Well, Mr. Archie, we appreciate you being on. We wish you the best of luck against Memphis, and hopefully the Covenant Manifesto stuff all gets released, because I know that there was a lot more manifestos that have not been leaked yet. So, Daniel, where can people find you if they want to follow you and all that stuff?
Just find me at all the usual places at Unframe of Mind on all social media platforms. That's it.
That's great. And Archie, do you guys have social media or anything like that, Mr. Archie?
Yeah, I do podcasts on social media and videos. I do shorts on YouTube. You can find us, again, like I said, at YouTube, Tennessee Firearms Association, and go to the shorts. I've been trying to do one of those a week, and I'm not very popular with the General Assembly right now because I'm calling them out.
That's awesome. That is fantastic.
And I'm on X as well. You can find me there at See Richard Archie. And we also have a page from Tennessee Firearms Association on X where we put a lot of our information out.
That's great. That's great. I know I'm following them. Well, Mr. Archer, we appreciate you being on. We wish the Tennessee Firearms Association the absolute best of luck in their litigation. And until next time, never mind the bollocks and watch the Patriot Punkcast.